Good evening, everyone. Welcome. My name is Bernadette Brooks, and I'm the president of the Napa County League. And I'd like to thank you for joining us tonight as the League of Women Voters of Napa County makes this presentation about the general election state ballot measures. We would also like to thank the Napa branch of the American Association of University Women for their support in this forum. If you want to hear this forum in Spanish, click on the globe-like icon down below and select Spanish audio for simultaneous translation. Our translator tonight is Dalila Hernandez. Our other League of Women Voter members that are helping us are Sherry Thomas, our technical support and host, Mary Ellen Hester.
Good evening.
Robin Orsini, Ingrid Swenson, Cindy Radford, Lynn Baker, and Joyce Kingery. As many of you may know, the League of Women Voters was founded over 100 years ago. In 1920, the year when women first gained the right to vote, its purpose was, and still is today, to promote an active and informed citizenry for women and men of all ages. The League has two separate and distinct roles. One is election education and voter service. The other is community action and advocacy. As a nonpartisan organization, it is our policy not to support or oppose any candidate or political party. During an educational forum as this one, we will be giving you unbiased analysis of the pros and cons of each of the state propositions on the ballot this year, based on official election literature. While we do sometimes take positions on various issues, this is only after we study them at local or state levels and arrive at a broad consensus. However, our intent tonight is to educate you on the propositions on your ballot. And we will go to the slides. So first, we will define ballot propositions. So I'd like to explain what propositions are. Propositions are proposed state laws that are placed on the ballot for the public to vote on. A proposition, if it passes and becomes law, only if it receives more than 50% yes votes. In this year's general election, we have 7 propositions. Just one second. And okay.
We need the slides now.
Yeah, we just had a glitch there. I think we'll be fine soon. So the propositions can either make new laws, change existing laws, or change California's constitution. Propositions can be placed on the ballot by people who collect enough voter signatures for an issue or by the California legislature. There are 2 types of proposition. An initiative is a proposition that, if passed by a yes vote of over 50%, will make a change in the law. A no vote of over 50% means that voters want things to stay the way they are now. 6 of the 7 propositions on the ballot are initiatives, number 1 and 26 through 30. Referendums is a referendum is a proposition that asks voters to change a law that's already been passed by the people. Voting for or against a referendum can be confusing. A yes vote of over 50% means the voters support the law and want to keep it the way it is. A no vote of over 50% means voters do not want the proposition to go into effect. We will be presenting official pros and cons for 7 in 3 categories. The first category is healthcare, and there are 3 ballot propositions related to healthcare. Number 29 is about kidney dialysis clinics. Number 1 concerns reproductive rights and contraceptives. And number 31 looks at vaping. Then we have 2 propositions asking voters to decide measures that affect our communities. Number 28 is on funding for arts and music education. Number 30, it affects taxes and transportation. Both are initiatives that want to change current laws. And last are 2 sports betting related ballots. Number 26 discusses in-person sports betting, and number 27 looks at sports betting on the internet. Both initiatives would amend the state constitution as well as change certain laws. So we want to start tonight by looking at the first of the healthcare related propositions, number 29, and our presenter will be Mary Ellen Hester. Mary Ellen.
Next slide. Okay, let's talk about Proposition 29, pros and cons. Proposition 29 is worded on the ballot as requires on-site licensed medical professionals at kidney dialysis clinics and establishes other state requirements. This initiative was put on the ballot because enough registered voters signed petitions to include it. If passed, it will change the health and safety code. The ballot says, should outpatient dialysis clinics be required to have a physician, nurse practitioner, or physician assistant on site at all hours when patients are being treated? And should they be required to provide various clinic-related information to patients and the state? About 80,000 Californians receive hemodialysis, usually 3 times a week, in one of the 650 kidney dialysis centers in California. This treatment cleanses the blood of waste products and lasts about 4 hours. Most clinics are open 6 days a week. Trained technicians administer the treatment. The State Department of Public Health is responsible for licensing chronic kidney dialysis clinics to operate in California, using federal regulations as the basis for its licensing. Dialysis clinics must be licensed to receive Medicare and Medi-Cal payments, which provide the care for most patients. The state requires that a trained technician be on location to administer the treatments. A federal requirement is that a board-certified medical doctor must be affiliated with each chronic dialysis clinic. While the doctor is responsible for care, the quality of care, staff training, and clinical practices, he or she is not required to remain on site or administer treatment. Federal law requires reporting to the National Healthcare Safety Network about kidney-related infections that occur between treatment. A patient's treatment plan is provided by the patient's personal doctor, who tracks patient care and must see the patient at least once a month. The doctor is not responsible for how the clinic is run, including staffing or safety protocols. Nearly 3/4 of the dialysis clinics are owned by 2 corporations, DaVita Incorporated in Colorado and Versensius Medical Care in Germany. Other clinics are operated by both nonprofit and for-profit entities. An increasing number of doctors are owning clinics as joint ventures. Owners receive about 18% of gross income as profit. The Service Employees International Union is a large national organization. The SEIU, United Health Workers West, is a statewide union for healthcare workers with about 97,000 members. Workers at some dialysis clinics have been attempting to unionize since 2016. The SEIU-UHW has put 3 different propositions on the California ballot in the last 3 elections, all having to do with the operation of kidney dialysis clinics. In 2018, SEIU-UHW put Proposition 8 on the ballot, which would have put a 15% cap of profits of private clinic operators. The dialysis industry defeated the measure with a record of $111 million campaign. In 2020, the SEIU-UHW put Proposition 23 on the ballot, which would have required a physician to be on site during dialysis treatment. About $121 million was spent to defeat the proposition, of which about 85% of the campaign funds have come from the major dialysis corporations. The proposition was defeated by a 63 to 27% vote. This year's Proposition 29 has again been introduced by SEIU-UHW. The proposition wants to improve safety for patients and reduce stress on dialysis technicians. If passed, the clinics would be required to staff at least 1 licensed physician, nurse practitioner, or physician's assistant during kidney dialysis treatment. The California Department of Public Health can make an exception where there is a shortage of practitioners, in which case telehealth must be utilized. Next slide, please. The proposition asks that patients and the public receive more information about clinic ownership. The increasing practice of doctors owning clinics jointly may lead to some conflicts of interest. Proposition 29 would require that patients be provided with a list of all physicians who can have ownership interest of 5% or more in the clinic. Anyone with at least 5% interest would also have to report this information to the state every 3 months. Failure to do so could result in a fine of up to $100,000. The proposition requires reporting dialysis-related infections to a state agency and mandates state approval for clinics to close or reduce services. Right now, this must only be reported to a federal agency. Clinics cannot close or reduce services without state approval. Clinics must offer the same level of care to all patients, regardless of whether the treatment is paid for by private insurance or government-funded program, such as Medicare or Medi-Cal. Fiscal impact on state and local government is uncertain. If passed, clinic staffing costs could increase. Clinic owners would then likely negotiate higher private insurance payments to offset increased staffing costs. The state would have to pay for any increased costs for Medi-Cal patients, as well as the cost of increased administrative responsibilities. Those in favor of Proposition 29 feel that kidney dialysis clinics need to be better supervised and regulated. Dialysis is a potentially dangerous procedure, and having a trained doctor, nurse practitioner, or physician assistant on site during patient treatment hours would assure more medical oversight. No one would be turned away due to the source of payment for service, and service for everyone would be comparable. Increased staffing would mean more oversight, which is particularly needed in rural areas with smaller clinics. Please see the list of proponents for this proposition. Next slide. The main financial supporter of the proposition is SEIU-UHW, who also put this initiative on the ballot. As of September 6, 2022, the union had donated $7.9 million to the campaign. The California Democratic Party is also in favor of this proposition. Over $1 million donated. Those who are not in favor of Proposition 29 say it is unnecessary for patient safety to have a physician, nurse practitioner, or physician assistant on site. Nurses and other technicians are adequately trained to administer dialysis and respond to special needs. Currently, only 8 states have regulations mandating staffing ratios, and there is no evidence that these staffing requirements have improved care. Data shows that California has lower infection rates than in states that have more defined staffing requirements in place. There is also a concern that this law might result in a shortage of medical personnel in other necessary areas of care. This change could greatly increase dialysis treatment costs. As a result, some clinics might become financially unsustainable and forced to close. Here is a list of opponents of this proposition. Opponents of Proposition 29 are the 2 largest dialysis businesses, DaVita Incorporated, almost 53 million, and Versensius Medical Care, 27 million, along with 3 other dialysis-related medical organizations, $6 million.
Thank you, Mary Ellen. And now we'll look at prop number 1 presented by Robin Orsini.
Hi, let's talk about Proposition 1.
I'm done.
What?
And I'm off screen. Oh, I'm not.
Mute, please. The wording of Proposition 1 is constitutional right to reproductive freedom, legislative constitutional amendment. As stated, Proposition 1 was placed on the ballot by the legislature, and if passed, will amend the California Constitution. The ballot question reads, should the California Constitution expressly provide that the state of California shall not deny or interfere with an individual's reproductive freedom in their most intimate decisions, including the right to choose to have an abortion and the right to choose or refuse contraception? Next slide. The California Constitution protects everyone's right to privacy. A California Supreme Court case decision holds that this express right to privacy extends to a woman's decision about whether or not to have an abortion. The Reproductive Privacy Act, passed by the legislature in January 2003, reiterates that a woman's right to choose birth control and abortion are fundamentally personal and private decisions. In California, the limit of when an abortion can occur is up to the time a fetus becomes viable, meaning able to live outside the womb. Viability occurs around 24 weeks and is determined by a woman's doctor. After viability, also known as quickening, an abortion can only be performed when a pregnant woman's health or life is at risk. The recent U.S. Supreme Court decision in Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization eliminated the federal right to abortion, leaving it up to each state to make their own family planning laws. This has raised concern that California's laws protecting reproductive freedom and the use of contraceptives could be similarly threatened by political trends and future Supreme Court decisions. If Proposition 1 passes, the California Constitution will ensure that the state can never interfere with a woman's most intimate family planning decisions. These decisions include the fundamental right to choose to have an abortion and the fundamental right to choose or refuse contraceptives. If these rights are enshrined in the state's constitution, they cannot be changed by federal laws or by U.S. Supreme Court decisions. The government has no oversight role, so there are no costs, regulatory or otherwise. At least that's what is anticipated. Those in favor of Prop 1 say that while reproductive rights and contraception are protected under privacy laws in California, privacy is not clearly defined and laws can be changed. The Constitution is the state's highest law, so an amendment protecting reproductive rights would be difficult to abolish. Proposition 1 will keep reproductive decisions out of the hands of politicians and in the hands of a woman and her doctor. See the list on your screen for the names of the 3 endorsee organizations. To date, almost $10 million has been collected for this campaign. The highest donor in the top 10 is surprisingly the Federated Indians of Graton Rancheria, followed by the California Medical Association and affiliates. Donations from 3 Planned Parenthood affiliates total almost $975,000. 2 teachers associations have given a total of $500,000, and the ACLU of Northern California has contributed $250,000. Those who are against Prop 1 say that the recent U.S. Supreme Court ruling gave states the option to decide whether women will retain the rights previously protected under Roe v. Wade. And California laws already protect women's reproductive health and the right to choose whether or not to have children. Prop 1 has no time restrictions on abortion, even though other state laws do have these restrictions. More out-of-state women will seek abortions in California, and the measure will cost taxpayers more money. The list on your screen shows the 3 official opponents. Next slide. Of the almost $73,000 raised, one organization has contributed $65,000 of that, and the next 2 largest donors are for $1,000. The remaining donations are reported as $500 or less.
Thank you, Robin. And now for our third healthcare-related proposition, number 31, presented by Ingrid Swenson.
Good evening. Let's talk about Proposition 31. The wording of Proposition 31 is referendum on 2020 law that would prohibit the retail sale of certain flavored tobacco products. This proposition is a referendum that asks voters whether to put into effect a law that bans certain types of flavored tobacco products, or whether to keep the status quo and continue to allow such products to be sold. The proposition was put on the ballot by a signature gathering campaign opposed to the measure. The ballot question reads, should the law enacted by the California legislature to ban the sale of certain flavored tobacco products be approved? Again, a majority of yes votes means these tobacco products would be banned under the California Health and Safety Code. A majority of no votes means that voters do not approve of the ban on the sale of certain flavored tobacco products. Terminology. An electronic cigarette or e-cigarette is a battery-operated device that delivers a liquid solution of nicotine or types of cannabis, flavorings, and other chemicals. It comes in many shapes and sizes and offers a variety of flavors and other substances. E-cigarettes are called vaping products, among other terms. Vaping occurs after the battery heats non-water liquid and turns it into an aerosol or vapor of tiny particles which can then be inhaled. The Food and Drug Administration classifies vaping products as tobacco products because they carry liquid nicotine, a derivative of tobacco. In 2020, let's move forward. Law banning sale of flavored tobacco products. In 2020, the California legislature passed Senate Bill 793, which bans the sale of all flavored tobacco products. This includes pods for pens and tank-based systems for vaping, as well as menthol cigarettes and chewing tobacco. It does not include premium cigars and hookah tobacco, nor does it mention unflavored tobacco products, which are legally sold in California. The ban would apply to both vending machine and in-store purchases. Any sales are subject to a $250 fine. Senate Bill 793 did not go into effect because grassroots petitions demanded that a referendum be put on the ballot so that voters, rather than the legislature, could decide the issue. California has not tried to ban other unflavored tobacco products. Instead, it passed a clean indoor air law, which prohibits smoking inside public, government, commercial, and educational places. E-cigarettes are included in the no indoor smoking ban. Smoking and vaping are allowed in the privacy of one's home. Tribally owned casinos and gaming establishments also remain exempt. In December 2019, a federal law was passed making it illegal for minors under age 21 to buy any type of tobacco product, including smokeless nicotine products. The Food and Drug Administration is planning to ban the sale of menthol cigarettes as well. More and more cities and counties are banning the sale of flavored tobacco products. While tobacco use is illegal under current law for teens, nevertheless, youth aged 12 to 17 continue to comprise the largest population using e-cigarettes. The U.S. Center for Disease Control and Prevention found that 20% of high school students and 10% of middle school students reported e-cigarette use. Teens are attracted to the variety of candy-like flavors, the different methods of vaping, and the lack of creating a smoky environment. The tobacco industry is pushing these flavors and vaping methods to encourage a lifelong habit of tobacco use in a new generation. Out of about $2.8 billion from current tobacco tax revenue, if Proposition 31 passes, the state could lose up to $100 million in tax revenue. Funds are primarily used for such healthcare programs as Medi-Cal, tobacco control programs, and early childhood development. A decrease in usage might decrease healthcare costs over the long term. And we should be on slide 12, please. Yes, on Proposition 31, supporters say that liquid nicotine is addictive. Could we go to the next screen, please? Liquid nicotine is addictive and can lead to such serious, irreversible health issues as brain development, lung and heart disease, and cancer. A ban on flavored tobacco products will greatly decrease usage, especially among youth. A ban will help people quit smoking menthol-flavored cigarettes. Please see the screen for a list of proponents of supporting this measure. The Yes campaign has raised over $6 million. Michael R. Bloomberg is the top donor with over $4 million. Kaiser Permanente is second with over $1 million, followed by the California Teachers Association with $250,000. 5 other health-related organizations have together donated almost $5 million. Those opposed to Proposition 31 say that it is a form of prohibition, which has been proven not to work. Passage will drive more illegal tobacco sales and make regulation of underage sales even harder. Banning some products will cause users to switch to other tobacco products that may be more harmful. See the list of opponents on your screen. The opposition has raised under $2 million so far. The top 9 donors are affiliates of either Philip Morris USA or R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company.
Thank you, Ingrid. And now we'll turn to the community issues category with Proposition 28, presented by Cindy Radford.
Hello. Let's talk about Proposition 28. Proposition 28 is worded on the ballot as provides additional funding for arts and music education in public schools. This initiative was put on the ballot because enough registered voters signed petitions to include it. If passed, it will make changes to the education code. Your ballot says, should the state provide specific funding for arts and music education in public schools, an amount higher than the existing constitutional minimum amount required for public education? Proposition 98, passed in 1988, changed the California Constitution to require a minimum percentage of the state budget for K through 14 education. This guarantee is 40% of the state's general fund, which can fluctuate based on student attendance and cost of living. Also, in any fiscal year, the amount can change with a 2/3 vote from both the state, Senate, and Assembly. In other words, California could provide less funding than what is required by Proposition 98. Our public schools serve about 6 million K through 12 students. School districts are under the jurisdiction of local school or governing boards. Roughly 60% of California public school students come from low-income families. State law requires schools to provide arts and music instruction to all students in grades 1 through 6. Students in grades 7 and 8 must be offered art and music as an elective. High school students must complete 1 year of either arts or music education, or a foreign language, or a career-related technical field to graduate. The state's public university admission policies require high school students to complete 1 year of classes in the visual or performing arts. However, even with these requirements, only 20% of schools have a dedicated teacher for art and music programs. There is currently no guaranteed source of annual funding for such education in the public schools. Some other state-funded before and after school enrichment programs may contain arts and music education. If passed, this proposition would require the state to provide additional funding to increase arts and music education in public K through 12 classes, also paid from the general fund. Proposition 28 would add at least 1% more funding to schools than what is already apportioned to schools for all curricula. In a year when the legislature decides to reduce K through 12 funding, the arts and music budget would still remain at the 1% minimum funding. Prop 28 distributes funding to public schools, including charter schools, based on enrollment in K through 12. Of the total amount, 70% would go to schools based on their share of statewide enrollment. The remaining 30% would go to schools based on their share of low-income students enrolled statewide. School principals would be responsible for planning how the funding would be spent. Schools with more than 500 students would be required to spend 80% of the money to employ staff, with another 20% on training and supplies. Each year, local school or governing boards would be required to certify to the state that their schools spent the funding for arts and music education provided by Proposition 28, and to report publicly to their communities about how this money was used. If this proposition passes, the state's general fund will likely be spending $800 million to $1 billion more dollars each year. This amounts to less than 0.5% of the general fund. Those in favor of Proposition 28 say that while it would increase funding for educational programs, it would do so without raising taxes. In California, only about 1 in 5 public schools has a dedicated teacher for arts or music programs, compared to other states such as New York, where over 75% of schools have designated arts and music instructors. Studies have shown that arts and music education generally improves students' personal lives and improves their academic skills. The list on your screen indicates many supporters of this proposition. Financial support has mainly come from the former superintendent of the Los Angeles Unified School District, Austin Buettner, an ex-financial investment broker who has contributed over $3.75 million to the campaign. 3 other contributors have donated $1 million or more. The other top 5 contributors donated from $100,000 to $250,000 to the campaign. No arguments against this proposition were submitted to the Secretary of State. A Los Angeles Times editorial criticized the proposition as ballot box budgeting, which reduces the ability to fund other programs that are equally important. And if enrollment continues to decline, this law would reduce flexibility to shift school funding to other programs. No data against this proposition is available. It is believed that no substantial financial support has been given so far against Proposition 28.
Thank you, Cindy. And now the next proposition, number 30, will be presented by Lynn Baker.
Good evening. We're going to address Proposition 30 now. The wording on this initiative statute is provides funding for programs to reduce air pollution and prevent wildfires by increasing tax on personal income over $2 million. This initiative, if passed, would change the Public Resources Code and the Revenue and Taxation Code. The ballot question reads, should the tax rate on personal income above $2 million be increased by 1.75% and the revenue dedicated to zero-emission vehicle subsidies, zero-emission vehicle infrastructure, such as electric vehicle charging stations, and wildfire suppression and prevention programs? Emissions from gasoline-powered cars and smoke from wildfires are the two largest sources of increasingly poor air quality in the state. A technical term for poor air quality is greenhouse gases, or GHG. Global warming and severe drought are increasing the risk of wildfires. State law now requires California to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions to a level 40% below a certain scientific benchmark by 2030. The law also now requires ride-sharing companies such as Lyft and Uber to have 90% of their drivers using zero-emission vehicles, or ZEVs, by 2030. A plan issued by Governor Newsom on August 25th states that 100% of new vehicles sold should be ZEVs by 2035. California recently committed to spending $10 billion over the next 5 years on increasing the use of ZEVs. The state is currently spending between $2 and $4 billion annually on the ability to respond to wildfires. Proposition 30 proposes an increase of the income tax rate of 1.75% on individual incomes above $2 million. If Proposition 30 passes, the tax rate would total about 15% for each dollar above $2 million in income. This rate would be higher than any other state in the U.S. The tax increase would end by January 2043. The tax could end several years earlier if California is able to drop its GHG below certain levels before then. The allocation of the net funds for Proposition 30 would be 45% to promote purchase of ZEVs, including subsidies and rebates, 35% to increase the availability of electric charging stations, 20% to help fund wildfire suppression and prevention. Proposition 30 stipulates that at least half of funds allocated for ZEVs and their charging stations must benefit communities that are disadvantaged or low income, including reducing air pollution. It also requires CAL FIRE as their top priority to hire and train additional firefighters. If the proposition is passed, yearly tax revenue is projected to be $2.8 to $4 billion annually for ZEV funding and $700 million to $1 billion for wildfire response. These revenues could increase over time. Proceeds would be put into a special fund separate from the general fund, and strict accountability would ensure that funds are spent as intended. Those supporting Proposition 30 say that existing state programs are insufficient to address California's poor air quality, which is primarily due to automobile exhaust and wildfire smoke. There is also a need to increase revenue to encourage use of ZEV vehicles, as well as to fight the catastrophic wildfires that are destroying our forests and homes. Here is a list of proponents on your screen. I'll pause for a moment so you can scan the slide. The main supporter of Proposition 30 is Lyft, which has donated over $25 million to the campaign. The International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers has donated $1 million. Other heavy contributors to date have donated from $50,000 to $150,000. Those opposing Proposition 30 say that California is already investing more than $50 billion in climate issues, including $10 billion for ZEVs. More money should come from the general fund or from the state's budget surplus. There is no guarantee that Proposition 30 will make ZEVs affordable for most Californians. Proposition 30 locks in money from income taxes to special interests, keeping it away from school funding, which normally relies on such income tax revenues. High earners may leave the state if taxes increase. See the list of opponents on your screen. Governor Gavin Newsom opposes this proposition, stating that it is fiscally irresponsible and puts the profits of a single corporation ahead of the welfare of the entire state. Total raised against passage of this proposition is over $11 million. The top 3 donors are individuals who have each given $1 million. All but one of the other 7 top donors are individuals who have each donated almost $500,000.
Thank you, Lynn. And now for the last category, sports betting propositions number 26 and 27 will both be presented by Joyce Kingery.
Good evening. I'm going to discuss both, as Bernie said, Props 26 and 27 that concern sports betting. And undoubtedly, you have seen many ads on TV about these propositions, very confusing ads, I might say. And as with many ads, they're not always accurate. So here are the facts. Proposition 26, it allows in-person roulette, dice games, sports wagering on tribal Indian lands. And Prop 27 allows online and mobile sports wagering outside tribal lands. Now, both propositions are initiatives that were put on the ballot by voters through a signature gathering process. And both would call for a constitutional amendment and adding sections to the law codes. Now for some next slide. Now for some background that applies to both propositions. Sports betting. Sports betting is a term used to refer to wagers placed on sports such as football and boxing. The term has been expanded to include non-sports wagering, such as animal racing, horses and greyhounds, events, the Grammys and the Oscar Awards, and games, cards, the lottery, and slot machines. Legal gambling. The California Constitution and state statutes define what types of gambling are legal. It is legal to play the California lottery, bet on horse races, and wager on certain card games in card rooms. It is legal for tribal casinos to operate slot machines, lottery games, poker, bingo, and certain card games. Roulette, dice games, and betting on sports events are illegal in tribal casinos and everywhere else in the state, as well as on the internet. The U.S. Supreme Court ended the federal prohibition on sports betting in 2018, leaving it to each state to decide whether to legalize sports betting. About 20 states have taken this step so far. The rules governing tribal-owned casinos are set by compacts, agreements between tribal owners and the state. That's a little different than some other states. The California legislature has not developed legislation addressing sports betting, leading to these 2 different initiatives being placed on the ballot. Both propositions would help to regulate and end illegal sports betting. If both propositions pass and a court finds that some propositions are conflicting, the proposition that received the greatest number of votes will become law. So the first question, Prop 26, the question on the ballot is, should California increase the allowable gambling activities at American Indian-owned casinos and allow betting on sports events at casinos and horse racing tracks? This is what the new law would do. We would legalize in-person sports betting at tribal casinos and allow customers to play roulette and dice games such as craps. Tribal casinos and 4 horse racing tracks in California could offer on-site betting on actual sports events like football games. It would not allow betting on high school or college sports events. At racetracks, sports betting could only be offered in person to people 21 years of age or older. Age restrictions on sports betting at tribal casinos would be negotiated between the state and each tribe. Legalization would make gaming laws enforceable. If the proposition passes, anyone could bring a civil lawsuit who believes gaming laws are being broken, and the state attorney general has declined to act. Penalty and settlement money would go to a state gaming fund, not to those bringing the suit. The fiscal impacts. Racetracks would pay a 10% tax on net revenue from betting at the tracks. Tax from betting in tribal casinos would be negotiated with each tribe. Monies would be deposited in a separate fund. Prop 26 could raise tens of millions of dollars each year in revenue from casinos, horse tracks, and fines from lawsuits. According to the Legislative Analysis Office, the LAO, most of the money will go to regulating in-person sports betting. 70% of net revenue after expenses would go into the general fund, 50% to the Department of Justice for gambling enforcement, and 15% to programs dealing with problem gaming and mental health research. Those in favor of Prop 21 say it would continue to aid American Indian tribes to develop self-sufficiency and lift them out of poverty. Much of the revenue made in casinos helps to pay for schools, housing, public safety, and other community programs. California casinos employ about 150,000 people. Expanding gaming and sports betting would create more jobs, which would bring in more revenue for both tribes and the state. In-person sports betting would become highly regulated, greatly reducing illegal gambling. And in-person wagering would provide strong age verification safeguards to prevent underage gambling. See a list of opponents on your screen. You can see that there are 31 California Indian tribes and tribal associations in favor of this. And then in terms of the money, 112 million was raised. And the top 10 donors were American Indian tribes or nations, and at least 31 tribes or tribal associations. Next slide. Those who are opposed to Prop 26 say that it would lead to more gambling addiction, could put small card rooms out of business, and the expansion of sports betting at racetracks could expand cruelty to racehorses, and that this proposition does not address employment issues such as having few benefits and little job security. See the list of proponents on the screen. And of course, and then down there we see we have an Animal Welfare Association, again, because of the possibility of animals, racehorses being not treated as they should be. And then we go on to the financial support. So $42 million raised. Donors over 2 million are, as you can read down through, mostly casinos. And then in terms of, okay, so then we're through with, I think, Proposition 26. So now on to Proposition 27. Should California allow online and mobile sports betting for people 21 years and older? So if passed, Proposition 27 would legalize sports betting online and on mobile devices for all legal wagering everywhere in California, except on tribal lands. No betting could still occur for high school sports events, but betting on college sports would be allowed, unlike Prop 26. All sports betting would be illegal for minors, but age would be difficult to regulate on the internet. Bets could only be placed through a licensed gaming tribe or related licensed business. Online betting would be regulated by a newly formed government department. Revenue. Since location is not a criterion, a tribe could offer specific sports betting under the tribe's name and branding. To do so, the tribes would pay the state a one-time $10 million licensing fee with a renewal fee every 5 years. Non-tribal gaming companies would be able to operate in the name of a tribe and pay a state licensing fee of $100 million with a renewal fee every 5 years. The state would collect a 10% tax on net revenue of all tribes and companies offering sports betting, which would go into a newly created fund. No revenue would go into the general fund. Revenue from the tax would go into this new fund, and 85% of the fund money would be used for homelessness and related mental health and addiction programs. 15% would be distributed among tribes that are not involved in sports betting. The fiscal impact. There are many variables and depends on the number of entities that offer online betting, any renegotiation of compacts between the state and the tribes, and the number of people that engage in online betting. State revenue could be lucrative, increasing from hundreds of millions up to 500 million each year. Regulatory costs would be offset by payments that sports betting operators must pay to the state for such regulation. Those in favor of Prop 27 say that it would provide extra funding to support programs that address homelessness, mental health, and addiction in California. Online betting is occurring illegal in California through offshore or out-of-state bookies. This proposition would end such operations. Prop 27 would benefit every California tribe to some extent. So we're going to look at the list of the proponents. Major League Baseball and the companies, the people who are donating the money. The next slide. Financial support is coming from Betfair Interactive US, Crown Gambling, BetMGM, and Penn Interactive Ventures. Most of these companies reside in New York and Massachusetts, so quite a bit of the money will be going out of state. Yeah, it says here, no on Prop 27, out-of-state betting companies will greatly benefit. Only rich tribes will be able to afford these high licensing fees. I mean, even 10 million is a lot for many of these tribes. Tribal casinos and card rooms would likely to see a decrease in clientele, resulting in the loss of jobs. More people would become addicted to gambling, and they don't feel that that would be a good trade-off for helping homelessness. And we'll see the opponents on the screen. And you see here over 50 California Indian tribes and nations. And then the California Democratic and Republican parties. And the financial support. You'll see again, wealthy Indian tribes. And that is the end. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Joyce, and thanks to all the presenters that helped educate us tonight on these important ballot issues. Also, a reminder that in a few days, the recording of this forum will be on our website, lwvnapa.com, and out on our LWV Napa YouTube channel. If you want more information, we will be posting a website and in the chat some other information for you to find more information. If you're not a member of our local league and would like to join us, you can visit our website, LWV, or you can just, if you want to receive our newsletter and sign up, just send an email to lwvnapa@gmail.com. And don't forget that ballots start arriving next week. Please encourage friends and family to vote, and remember to sign the back of your ballots. We thank you now for joining us and helping make democracy work. Good night, everyone.